County. This is the miracle of all miracles. 3 days.
Yep.
Look at the beautiful food, all of your beautiful faces. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is Mary Roebling. Currently I serve on the executive board of the Benzonia County Democratic Party. We have sign-in sheets over here. We are having our big honoree dinner next Sunday. If you haven't signed up, it's $40. We're having great speakers, our very own Dan Scripps, and also Jim Carruthers from Traverse City, who is one of the mayors that's working on instituting the standards for the Paris Accords in their local communities. So we're going to have great speakers, excellent food, fabulous people like yourselves. So if you haven't signed up, please do. Also, we have sign-up lists for gerrymandering. We don't want to gerrymander. So on your way out, get food. There's coffee in the closet. And sign up for something. Okay, how many of you want a new governor? I thought so. Okay, well, it's my great pleasure to introduce Gretchen Whitmer. I'm not going to do a lot. She can talk for herself. She's been a state legislator in the House and in the state Senate. She's been a prosecutor. She's been a caregiver. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's a good friend. She governs from her personal knowledge of what life is like and listens to what your concerns are. Oh, wait. Sorry, this is really important, but you guys have to call our friend Congressman Bergman and vote against, no, on House Bill 620. It's a bill that is designed to weaken the Americans with Disabilities Act and make it so that buildings don't have to put in dips and bathrooms unless you sue them and say your rights have been violated, which is why when I was talking about Gretchen, I was thinking about that and you. So call him, HB 620, and here you go, Gretchen Whitmer.
Okay. Well, thank you. I am just thrilled that so many of you came out on a Saturday morning to talk about politics and the gubernatorial election next year. This is what I'm seeing as I get across the state. People are engaged, and with all the ugliness and things to be unhappy about, as I travel the state, and today marks, I'm in the 40th county I've been in since jumping into this race. But no matter where we go, we're seeing crowds. We're seeing people turning out and engaging, and I think that's in a world of ugliness and things to be upset about and unhappy about. We're finding each other, and that's how I know we start setting the agenda, is when we do start finding our common ground and speaking with one voice. And so I went to the Upper Peninsula in February. I know, you guys are quick. Some people I say, let it sink in and think about what I just said. But I did. I went to the Upper Peninsula in February. I went to 11 out of 15 counties, and everywhere we went, the crowds were turning out. And I know it's not about me, it's this environment that we're in, but when you're standing in Houghton, Michigan at a Super 8 for a potluck and 250 people are standing there in February, you know something's happening. The organizer said he hadn't seen this many people together since Jim Blanchard was governor. I mean, that's a long time ago. So anyway, I'm thrilled about seeing all of you this morning. You know, I love the state of Michigan. I am proud to be a Michigander. But I'm looking around at the state that my daughters are growing up in, and in a lot of ways it hardly resembles the one that I think of when I talk about my Michigan pride. You know, there was a point in time where Michigan public schools were the finest around. There was a point in time where our roads were safe to travel on and business knew their goods were going to get to where they needed to be. There was a time where if you were willing to work hard, you could make a really good living and afford to buy the car you were making and raise your family up and retire with dignity in this state. And there was a point in time where we lived up to our motto of the Great Lakes state. And I look at the Michigan that my daughters are growing up in and that kids across the state are growing up in, and I see that our schools are falling further and further behind. Right now we rank 41st out of 50 in 4th grade reading. Reading. Fundamentals like that. And I know it's not the fault of teachers. Despite all of the attacks on teachers, we've got people who dedicate their lives to education. But it's only by talking to a first-year teacher in Alpena, one child who qualifies for the bridge card, that you understand how hard it's been for people who want to make their life's work educating kids, and how we've got to do better by our teachers in order to do better by our children. Yeah, we can clap for that, right? It's traveling the state and knowing that there are chunks of bridges falling out and endangering people on our roads, that some of them look like they're turning back to gravel. You know, it is talking to someone who hasn't had a raise in 10 years, or the single mom who's working a couple of minimum wage paying jobs and can't make ends meet, that you understand. People are really hurting in this state and need a champion and need paths to skills so they can get into better jobs. And frankly, the Great Lakes state still has a city full of families that can't bathe their children in the water coming out of their taps, much less drink the water at the dinner table. We deserve better. We should be leading this country and leading this world, not lagging our own country the way that we are right now. That's the kind of Michigan I think we deserve, our Michigan, where kids can thrive and families can get ahead. And at the end of the day, we know our leaders at our capital are looking out for us, the people of this state. I've spent my whole life in this state. I went to the public schools. I was raised in Grand Rapids and East Lansing, where I live now with my family. And I was raised in a household with a Milliken Republican father and a Frank Kelly Democratic mother.
Frank Kelly.
You can imagine we had some interesting conversation. And if my dad was here, I said this the other day, and he was standing there and said, they're not that different anymore, Milliken Republicans and Democrats. But, you know, I was raised in the household where the philosophy was, you know, we are at our best where we're trying to solve problems, not just politicize problems, where our allegiance to the state is more important than our allegiance to our own agenda or the people that bankroll campaigns or a political party for that matter. That government's role is to level the playing field so that everyone has got a real shot of getting ahead in this state, and that's what's ultimately in the best interest of our economy as well. I think we got a lot of work to do in Michigan. My favorite memories as a kid growing up here always involved the water. You know, I grew up on the Thornapple River in Grand Rapids and used to swim with my brother and sister, and we used to fish for perch off the dock in Onekama. And right now I've got a place in Elk Rapids where my husband and I get to hang out with our children. And the water defines who we are in this state. Because of our abundance and because we're home to 20% of the world's fresh water, we've been lousy stewards of it. And we need to be world leaders in stewardship of water. That's something that's very important to me, and I know it comes up no matter where I get in this state. We got a lot of work to do. So I served in the legislature for 14 years. I was the top Democrat on the budget for the first term of Governor Granholm, and then when I went over to the Senate for 8 years, the last 4, I was the Senate Democratic leader. I'm kind of known for being tough and waging some tough battles, taking on even governor in my own party. When governors try to pull money out of the school aid fund to shore up holes in the general fund, I'd take them on. I don't care what party they're in. And I also, though, pride myself that I'm able to roll up my sleeves and work with anyone who really does want to solve problems. And I'm thinking about things like that I was able to negotiate a cost of living increase on the minimum wage. And every year in January, we're seeing a little bit of an increase. It's not good enough, but it's a start, and it's because of the work that I was able to do as the leader on behalf of people in the Capitol, even though I was in the minority. But one of the things that I am really proud of is that, you know, Governor Snyder, who I have done battle with on many issues from right to work to rape insurance to cuts to education, did stake out the position that he was going to try to extend the Affordable Care Act here in Michigan. And when he did that, I knew it wasn't an easy thing for a Republican governor to do with a Republican legislature, but I said, I want to partner with you and make this a reality. So we got to the table and we strategized about how to put the votes together, and we made Medicaid expansion a reality here in Michigan. We got 640,000 people that now have health care coverage because of the work that we did. I think right now, more than ever, we need leaders with I think right now, more than ever, we need leaders not only with the right values, but with the experience to get things done for the people. Because the issues that we're facing are serious, and they are urgent, and it's going to take real leadership to solve some of these problems. We can't wait, and I am not a patient person. My first term in the legislature, they say the 5 most stressful things that'll ever happen to you in your lifetime are getting married, starting a new job, having a child, moving your home, or the death of a loved one. All 5 of those things happened my first term in the Michigan legislature.
Wow.
I was simultaneously caring for my mom at the end of her life with her battle against brain cancer and caring for my newborn daughter, who was 2.5 months old when my mom died. That experience didn't change any of my values, but it eliminated my patience. I know that I had some resources and flexibilities that most people don't have. But I recognize how hard it is for people who are taking care of young children at the beginning of their lives and aging adults, parents at the end of theirs. We need champions who don't have patience but want to solve problems. And I think that's what I bring to the table. So with that, I would like to make this less of a monologue and more of a dialogue. So I would like to open it up so that we can talk about, you can focus me on issues that you think I need to be working on, that you're worried about, or if you want to tell me what's happening in your community so I'm better knowledgeable about the problems that I got to work on fixes for. So yes.
I was really glad that you incorporated water issues in your opening statements. But line 5, I think I've read how your opinion on line 5. If the governor's office is in favor of shutting down line 5, who else needs to be on board to actually make that happen?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked line 5. I do talk about the water of our state because I do think it defines our borders, but it also defines who we are. I think we all kind of know that, right? Because we're home to 20% of the world's fresh water, we've been lousy stewards of it. We really have been. We've got Nestle that's pulling as much water out of the ground as they want to. We've got water being shut off for poor people in the city of Detroit and in other communities. We wouldn't let them shut off heat in the winter because you die without heat in the winter. You can't live without water either, and yet people are losing access to water. We've got oil running underneath the Great Lakes. My position on line 5 has always been we got to get oil out of the water. I also know that in order to do that, we need to file a lawsuit to enjoin the easement that Enbridge has going underneath the Great Lakes. One of the things that I have a hard time with, and I'm just going to throw my cards on the table, is when I'm in forums and other candidates say, day one, I'm going to shut down line 5. A governor can't do that. There's not a spigot in the governor's office that the person can just walk in and turn it off. We have to have a plan. And it's going to take legal action to do this, and we have to be smart about it. Day one, I'm prepared to file the paperwork to enjoin Enbridge from line 5's easement underneath the Great Lakes. People have said you need to endorse an alternative. Actually, endorsing an alternative is about the worst thing that we could do as a gubernatorial candidate, because then you've locked yourself into a position as the case moves forward that the court would say has really compromised our ability to get the line shut down in the first place. So that's why I'm not doing that. But I am saying it's time to get that out of the water. I mean, it's long overdue. There are all sorts of problems. Enbridge is just even starting to admit some of the problems that are, with the coating coming off and their inability to have the anchors that are keeping it, as on the bottom of the water. So there are a whole lot of different factors that go into this, but at the end of the day, we got to get that out of the water, and I'm absolutely committed to doing that and filing that paperwork on day one. I also think we should have a Department of the Great Lakes. You know, what if we said as a state, we're going to become leaders in water management and stewards, and we're going to ensure that everyone's got access to clean, affordable drinking water, and that corporate, corporations can't just pull as much water out of the ground as they want. That we're going to oversee all the mismanagement that leads to algae blooms across the state. What if we said Michigan's going to become expert in water? We've got research universities, we've got brains, and we've got water. Why aren't we leading the world and creating that as something that we would be known for, as opposed to a city that can't drink their water?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm a county drain commissioner and right on.
All right. Thank you. Yes.
Education. I have daughters teaching, my wife taught. The concern about the morale of teachers today is being expressed, and the lack of teachers who are coming into the system that are qualified. Money can't do all of it. It has to be attitude toward public education.
Right. So I'm just going to throw all my biases on the table, because I don't play poker, because I don't know how to say one thing when I mean another. My mom taught in the Lansing Public Schools. My grandmother taught in the Waterford Schools. My grandfather was a superintendent of Pontiac Schools. I am an education, I'm a product of the public schools. I am an advocate for the public schools, because I do believe, and I know, that having a great education system is not only the right thing to do for all the kids of this state, but that it's the most important thing that we can do for our economy and the future of this state. Teachers are a critical part of that, and education in Michigan, unlike other states, is a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be. This is the issue that Republicans and Democrats in other states find their common ground on, because the education of their population is important to everything that happens within that state. We have one family with a huge bank account that has directed where public education discussion has gone and made it a partisan issue in Michigan, and that's not right. We're paying a huge price for that. So I think step one is electing a governor who's not beholden to that family's agenda. That's step one. Step two is very good. You can all clap again. But I do think we've got to elevate the profession and treat people who go into teaching or into education as support staff as the professionals that they are. No one chooses that path because they think it's going to be lucrative. But you shouldn't have to be on food stamps to live out something that's so important to our society and do something that is a calling, in my humble opinion. Anyone who goes into teaching, I think it's a calling, and we got to treat them as professionals and make sure that they can make a living doing it. We got to get more people to go into teaching. We are looming on an education crisis in Michigan, and it's not just because of the policy, but because we can't get people to go into teaching. And so we got to pay them better. We've got to make sure that they don't leave with a boatload of debt after they get the degree that they need, and that when they do, they can take care of themselves and their families, and that it's a viable pathway for people.
And I don't know how you do it, but the conservative kind of picking on teachers all the time and demeaning public education is a big factor in all that, as people pay attention to public schools are no good and teachers are no good, and that I don't know how we do that, but there ought to be some affirmative kind of ways by which we don't just pick on charter schools, but we affirm how public education is good.
Absolutely. Well, I think it starts with leadership. It starts with having someone, who's in the governor's seat talking about educators as professionals, acknowledge them as critical partners in moving our economy forward, because they're educating the kids of this state. We get one chance to educate a child, and our system is not working for kids right now, and it's not the fault of the teachers, and we got to treat teachers better so that we can fix the system and make sure it is successful for our kids. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
Can I ask you two questions?
Of course.
First question is, how would you address, I was on the school board for Benton Central for several years, how would you address the inequities in funding between schools, particularly downstate schools versus up north schools, and the problems with Prop A, and how would you get the legislature to amend, like, so that downstate schools don't get $13,000 per student versus $7,500 per student in Bendy? And my second question is, obviously I have a daughter with special needs that I've brought with me today. I receive a certain amount of help from the state for her, which I appreciate to no end, but I can't take advantage of it because they cap the amount that I can spend on caregivers at $9 an hour. And when anybody can go down the street to McDonald's or Shop and Save and get a job that starts at $11 an hour, how can I get someone who's really good, that's willing to work with someone with special needs, to do it for $9 an hour when the state caps that?
Well, you have a beautiful smile. I'm glad that you did bring your daughter today. So I guess first you raised the question of inequity in terms of the per pupil allotment. And I recognize that that is a problem across the state. Our system of funding schools is based on taxes long ago that different communities raised on themselves, and they got baked into the formula. And now we've got this discrepancy in terms of per pupil allotments from community to community. The thought of Proposal A was that it would bring all schools up without artificially pushing some down, and it's a laudable goal, but it hasn't worked very well. One of the issues that I'm always concerned about as I see the debates, and this issue comes up in many communities across the state as I'm traveling and engaging with people, is the thought that we should all just, immediately be equal, pull some down and pull some up, and so it's all over equal. And that kind of conversation concerns me a bit, because what we should be advocating for is greater investment across the board in education. And I get concerned when I think that the Republicans have done a really good job of trying to pit this as district against district, as opposed to education as a greater priority for the state. One of the things that I remember, because it's not a pie where we can just slice it up differently and we are all successful. We need to bake a bigger pie. We need to make education a real priority across the state. When Governor Snyder proposed his first budget, I was the leader of the Democrats in the state Senate, which meant I was the top Democrat in state government at the time, so I was the counterpoint to the governor and the House Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. His budget gave a huge business tax break, and they paid for it by trying to eliminate the earned income tax credit, by taxing pensions and cutting schools. That's how they paid for the business tax break. And I remember vividly a superintendent writing to Governor Snyder and saying, please declare my school district a prison. Because we spend $40,000 a year to incarcerate someone in Michigan. And we spend between $7,500 and $13,000 or something in that range to educate a child in Michigan. And that stuck with me because I think it really colorfully explained that a budget is a statement of your values. It's not a balance sheet where the numbers just have to add up and everything's good. It's a statement of your values. When government decides to pinch pennies instead of treat water, and you get a city full of people that can't drink their water, some people died in the process, and a lot of people are going to be sick for a lifetime because of it, that's what you get. And I think that we think about the education issue in that light, that it is so important in the budget that it should be the top priority. And we need to pull school districts up that are on the lower end of the per pupil allotment. But I think we need to make education a bigger priority overall. Does that make sense? Okay. And then you asked, on the
state
assistance.
The amount that
Yeah, well, that doesn't make sense to me at all.
They give me what they call the HAB waiver, and it's in theory it's $40,000 a year to do whatever I want. But there are all these restrictions on it, and one of them is that it caps the amount that they reimburse caregivers at $9 an hour.
What did you call the HAB waiver?
HAB.
Oh, HAB waiver. Okay. Okay.
It's a short for, I don't remember what.
I'm gonna look it up because I don't know either. So
It's like all of those other little things that they have, names for things that you don't ever really know what they mean.
yeah.
But
Okay.
it caps it at $9 an hour. So the $40,000 in theory that I should have to help take care of my daughter so that I can serve on the school board and go to work and coach football and do all of the things that I like to do to give back to my community, I can't do
Mm-hmm.
because I have to be home. She needs constant supervision.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm gonna learn about the HAB waiver, but I totally agree with you that doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're a football coach? That's awesome. I love that.
She's something else.
She's tough.
She's something else. That's what your neighbors say here. All right. That's awesome. All right. Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to follow up with that. In our extended family, we have an adolescent, a 15-year-old with severe mental health problems. His dad doesn't make a lot of money. His mom has been hospitalized, psychiatric, and I think a lot of it's from the stress of taking care of it's stress of taking care of this child. He's on my child, but I'm serving as an advocate for the family, and getting my child assistance for the type of psychiatric care he needs is convoluted. The one facility that supposedly can really help him doesn't accept my nephew's insurance. Therefore, my child won't pick it up. This is how it's been explained to me by my child people. However, if my nephew quit his job or dropped his insurance and relied totally on my child would pick it up, which makes no sense. And this kind of couples into the whole issue of mental health services in this state.
Right.
That, if he doesn't get the kind of help he needs, he's likely to be one of those prisoners that we're paying $40,000 a year to house. When, if he could get the kind of help he needs now, there's a chance that would never happen.
Right.
And meanwhile, Mom has just been released from a psychiatric facility in a large part due to the stress in the household.
Mm-hmm.
So
mental health care has been something that it comes up everywhere because we all confront it, whether in our own house or our extended family, everyone across the state has confronted it with substance abuse often too, but we know that it impacts every one of us in our economy, in our quality of life, in our criminal justice system. You're making an important point. One of the things that happened under the Engler administration was that they just defunded mental health care in Michigan, and people don't have the resources that they need to get healthy. I've always had I've always supported mental health parity, covering mental health like any other, physical ailment under our healthcare law in Michigan. When the current Lieutenant Governor spearheaded coverage for autism, it was such a missed opportunity to really go for mental health parity. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences between the way that Democrats see the world and Republicans see the world. They fix problems that they face. We're thinking about how do we fix problems that everyone faces. And mental health is one of those critical issues that we're not doing nearly enough in Michigan. We're not pulling down as much federal funding that's available because it's not a priority right now. And so one of the things that I'm working with Governor Blanchard. He's helping me a lot on the campaign and advising, and he's really pushing that he thinks we need a Department of Mental Health in Michigan again, and to make it a priority to eliminate the stigma and to harness the potential funding that's out there and find solutions. We know what Michigan looks like from the opioid crisis. We are the worst of the worst in the Midwest, and this is where people come to get prescriptions because we are kind of the wild, wild west compared to what other states are doing. So I think it's all related, and it requires a concerted system and effort to solve the problem. So something that I'm committed to, and I hear what you're saying, and you're not unique, sadly. Your story's not. What other suggestions do you have on that front? Did you ever confront the system when it worked well? Are there lessons that we can learn from places that you understand it to be working well for people?
Well, I
Yeah.
think that.
You or anyone here? Yeah.
I think that, the major problem started when the England administration defunded state-supported programs to the extent that they did, because turning it over to outpatient community care has not worked, and outpatient assistance has not helped this child at all. And so I think that we have to look, if nothing else, and this is a horrible way to put it, but a cost-benefit analysis of what it will cost to treat him now versus what it will cost the Piazza and the prison system. And that's what the family's fighting against, but that's the path right now.
Well, you say it's a horrible way to put it, but that's the only way that some of the Republicans in the legislature will be persuaded, if you boil it down to dollars and cents. Not whether it's the right thing to do, but some of them, I think that's the most important part of the analysis for decision making. It's really unfortunate with term limits in Michigan that it's hard to get a long-term focus when your relevancy is only 6 years or 8 years or a maximum of 14 years. And I think that's a challenge. It doesn't mean we can't overcome it, but I think that makes it a little more challenging to have a long-term solution, and I think that's maybe one helpful way of looking at it.
Well, the other thing is the politicians, the elected officials like John Engler, who made these decisions, have no responsibility now for the decisions. There are no consequences for the decisions that you made.
Right.
And they can walk away from the problems and the problems they create. And
we're all living with it. Yeah.
He doesn't care. So I don't think he wants to.
Pardon?
I don't think he would want to.
No. Governor Snyder doesn't even visit, so, Yeah. Yes?
I wanted to ask about healthcare. The lady that was talking about caregiving for her challenged child. As America is aging, there's a huge thing where people are going to have to decide how they're going to spend their years in the end of their life. If they're sick or whatever, there's not enough places to put them. Everybody, and it's the cost thing for our whole economy. And like she was saying, you can't, if you want to take care of your own mother in your home, you can only get paid $9 an hour for some ridiculous amount that hasn't changed in forever. And so, of course, not everybody is set up to do that. But if they had some sort of help with that, it would help the whole entire country to not have a bunch of older people dwelling in nursing homes, so basically, not getting services because there's not enough people who want to do the work and not enough funding to provide it. So I agree that it's all a health issue to me as well as the mental health. That are declining for people that in their older ages are really going to be in trouble.
Well, I think it begs the question, what's the policy, right? I'm a lawyer. When you're in law school, you're always debating what's the public policy, and then I became a legislator. I'm like, how come no one talks about what the public policy is when they're actually passing laws? Right. When you're talking about that it's easier to get the coverage without having insurance, you can qualify, as opposed to if you have, the policy's wrong, the policy's not working, or there's no public policy. We need to have a governor and department heads who are asking those questions, and $9 an hour is going to keep people in homes, which is a lot more expensive, a worse quality of life. It's the worst way to do it. as opposed to encouraging family members to take care of their own, which is a better quality of life and there's savings to it. So I think these are important questions that we need leaders who are asking them, and when the answers doesn't make sense, we fix it. But you just wonder, is there an industry that is benefiting from the policy? Is it a nursing home industry that is determining the policy and forcing people to do it that way? Because they don't care about the quality of life, it's about making money. And I think when you're talking about privatization of veterans home services, or the privatization of what's happening in our prison system, when industry is driving the policy, we're not getting the right answer for people. And that's what this is about. It's not about, government's not so that private industry can make money, it's so that it works for us. Levels the playing field and takes care of people. Yes.
I think it's interesting. I've worked in healthcare for 40 years, and unfortunately, from my perspective, as a nurse, things have not changed very much in the last 40 years. The same problems that people are talking about now, they were talking about when I graduated from nursing school. And I think as long as healthcare is financially driven, we're not going to have good health care. There just isn't any way. Because as long as it's treated as a business where you make money per capita, it's never going to work. Because the rich are going to have the health care, the poor, the middle class probably will suffer the most. The poor who don't have anything or any insurance are going to get it.
Yep.
And it has always been that way, and it makes me very, very sad.
And so as an expert in the field, I mean, is it?
I'm not an expert.
Well, okay, all right. As someone with experience in the
Yeah.
field, what is the?
Well, the places where the care is the best are the place. I mean, obviously these hospitals call themselves nonprofit, which is ridiculous. The places that give the best care, the studies show, are places like Mayo's, the Cleveland Clinic, Kaiser out in California, because they're not, the doctors are salaried. The people in the place, everything, top to bottom, they're salaried. They're not per capita. So like if I go in to see someone and they can't really take care of me, they have no incentive to keep me anyway,
Right.
and not refer me on to someone that can actually help. Our research shows that those are the successful places.
Yeah.
Why do we not follow the research? Except that the pie has made everybody money.
Yeah.
It started out making the doctors money, then it made, because there really was malpractice, it began to make the lawyers money, so the doctors blamed it on the lawyers, and then the drug company jumped in, and then the insurance companies. And the pie just isn't that big for the amount of money these people want to take out of it. And you remember the days when, docs would go to, they'd be sued for malpractice, but they only wanted to be tried by their peers. So, I mean, excuse me.
Right.
So I think healthcare, being somebody that needs it and is going to need it more, I just think that it's a very scary proposition that we talk about education being, we're 41st. Look at the statistics of where we stand as a country in the world in healthcare. It's disgusting.
Our consumption of pharmaceuticals and our health outcomes.
Well, I mean, OB, we're at the same level as a third world country.
Yeah.
Because we can't get the care of the people that need it.
Well, and the for-profit model perverts all of the objectives. You know, we see it in education in Michigan. You know, our charter school system has just absolutely devastated the traditional public schools for worse outcomes for everybody, for all the children, except for the chartering organizations that are profiting off of it.
Teresa, we have time for one more question. We gotta get on the road.
She always says that, and then I overrule her. We'll do a few more if that's all right. Okay, yes, way back there, and then I saw two more hands. And I know you wanted to ask a question, so.
But just on what you're talking about right now, when do you think the idea of school of choice, the discussion about the legality of forced segregation? Because I think that is a huge outcome of school of choice. And I can tell you in our community, the Stevens community, it is evident everywhere. You know, people will come move into the neighborhood because they want to be a part of the inner city, send their kids out somewhere else. They're not a part of, and you know, the school is the nucleus of the community is no longer the case. And I really think that the discussion of segregation is huge in this, and it's not brought up at all. And is it legal? You know, I mean, it's something we fought, and now it's going to really come back to.
Yeah. Well, and she's from Muskegon, so I know that you're seeing that, but it's not unique, unfortunately, in a lot of communities across the state.
Yeah.
I really think that one of the greatest pressures that led to the schools of choice law becoming a reality in Michigan is the advent and proliferation of charter schools. You know, as resources are taken out of all traditional public schools, they've had to turn on one another to try to lure students in, so that because there's the money that's attached to the student. In Michigan, our charter schools are 80% of our charter schools are for-profit charter schools. Do you know what the national average is? 16%.
Wow.
So that tells you how out of whack Michigan is compared to the rest of the country. And it's all based on an agenda to undermine the traditional public schools. You know, they couldn't get vouchers passed. They tried parochiate, and then they tried vouchers with the DeVos agenda. They couldn't do it that way, so they just created these for-profit charter schools and blew the caps off of them, and they're siphoning dollars out that way to help make the ultimate case that traditional public schools don't work. And I think that that's a huge problem. A governor who understands that and is not going to be beholden to that, but is also wise enough and strong enough to use the power of the state budget against these chartering authorizers to actually close down schools that aren't working, which is the vast majority of the charters, by the way, so that we can infuse resources into schools that have the greatest socioeconomic challenges. Right now in the school aid budget, there's between $100 and $150 million that's being siphoned out of at-risk line item and English language learners, which I know both are huge for Muskegon schools and many schools across the state, but those in particular, two lines. About $150 million going to projects like a Van Andel project in Grand Rapids. Do they need money out of the English language learners and the at-risk students? No, they don't. So there I think are a lot of different contributing things that impact the segregation that you pointed. But I think you're making an important point, and I'm taking it to heart that that's something we got to talk about. So we're not talking about, we don't have a shot at fixing it. So thank you for raising it. I keep seeing more hands. Okay, yes.
Many of the things that you're speaking of are, yes, Michigan-related items, but they're really national. So when you're governor, do you see yourself having a platform as a governor with other like-minded governors, or the governor's conference, or whatever they call it, having an opportunity to begin to influence at a broader range as well as within your own state?
Yeah, so I think
Otherwise, I don't think it's going to
a
work.
governor who knows how to build caucuses, right, and use the power of the executive office to not just make change within our state, but to put pressure on what's happening in Washington, D.C., to be a voice for people across this country, of people who are stuck in other states like ours at the moment, but we're going to change ours. I think that there's a lot of potential there. You know, I saw our president, I hate even saying that, 45's budget agenda. But his budget agenda, you know, to eliminate the Great Lakes, the funding, and all I could think was, a governor who understands how to build a caucus. We've got a congressional delegation of Republicans and Democrats. We are one of many Great Lakes states, one of many states that rely on the Great Lakes. Governor who understands that and can harness that capacity, reach out to the other governors, have them reach to their congressional, create a Great Lakes caucus that could bring to bear a lot of pressure on the White House to change the outcome. Now, ultimately, they were successful in the short term, but there's a huge opportunity there, but it takes someone who knows how to do that and is willing to put the energy in and make it a priority. And then I usually follow up by saying, and I would even, just for you, reach out to Justin Trudeau and get him involved too. Well, let's be honest, I'm just looking for an excuse to get to know Justin.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to take your question, then maybe one more, and then I do have to hit the road.
Okay. When we passed medical marijuana back in 2008, by 63% of the vote in all 83 counties here in the state of Michigan, things were going great until we ended up with the likes of, in 2010, we ended up with the likes of Mr. Snyder, Mr. Schuette, senators, state senators like Gretchen Jones, and for the last 7 years, we are still being treated, well, they have fought us all the way. They have tried to tear apart the law and completely do away with it, even though it was the will of the people of Michigan. So for the last 7 years, we've still been treated like deviants and criminals, and several of us being locked up. My question is, and obviously we were basically robbed last year. We should have been on the November ballot last year, thanks to Snyder signing into law the 180-day rule. You know, we were robbed of being on the ballot. So we are definitely going to be on the ballot next year in November. And my question to you is, if we succeed in making you our next governor, will you, out of compassion, support us and work with us to implement our law if we succeed in also passing legalization next year here in the state of Michigan?
Yes. Sounded like a long question, easy answer. No, I'll just add to it. I've always been a proponent and supporter of the medical marijuana law. When in 2008, I told you that I cared for my mom at the end of her life, and I, as an advocate in the legislature, I was pushing for stem cell research in Michigan. I had studied the issue, and I knew that that's the most cutting edge research happening is embryonic stem cell research. And Michigan was one of only 5 states that didn't just embrace it. We outlawed it. We throw you in jail for doing the cutting edge research. And I was working with researchers at the University of Michigan, and I know they were having such a hard time recruiting talent into our state because we'd said to the world, if you're a scientist doing the most exciting work out there, we're going to throw you in jail in Michigan. And so as I learned about it and learned about the potential there, and I saw studies that they were making strides, my mom had GBM, it was glioblastoma multiforme, which is the worst kind of brain tumor you can have, that they in France had slowed down growth because of marijuana use. And they were doing stem cell research, and that's why when I couldn't get through the legislature, I banded with my colleague Joe Schwartz, a Republican, and we co-chaired the stem cell campaign. And we were on the ballot the same year that medical marijuana was. And so as a co-chair of that, that's where I spent a lot of my energy, but I endorsed the medical marijuana too at the time even. So it was really disheartened to see the voters speak and then an attorney general who was not interested in promulgating rules, Mike Cox at the time. So it kind of muddled along. And then, of course, the guy who led the campaign against medical marijuana became our Attorney General, who's going to be announcing for governor this coming week, Bill Schuette. And he undermined everything and threw the whole system into chaos after the voters had spoken. And I think that was a travesty. I think it was a violation of his job as our Attorney General. And so, absolutely, it's easy for me to say yes to your question, and it always has been. And I think we deserve better. We deserve leaders who actually pay attention and listen to what the people of this state want. I fought the emergency management law on the floor of the Senate, and then we, the people, had a referendum. We spoke up, and the Republicans didn't like the result, and they came back and passed it again and put an appropriation in it to make it referendum proof. It's unconscionable the way that these guys have just stifled and pushed back and defeated the will of the people, and I for one will not stand for it. And you've got an ally in me. All right, I'm gonna do 2 more questions. I'm leaving you, and then I'm out. I'm out. Yeah.
Okay, it's more of a comment. From birth to age 3, those are years for brain development. This region has a crisis as far as child care options go. There's basically no child care available if you have a child from birth to age 1. The child care that is available is very costly, not affordable to families, and the child care providers are not treated as professionals when they have an incredibly important job, and they are living in poverty because they get paid so poorly. I don't know what my question is, but it's just a big challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge across the state, and the first 1,000 days of our lives determine our lifelong health trajectory and our lifelong wealth trajectory. And we're missing the vast majority of Michiganders because we don't have a comprehensive universal early childhood education program in the state of Michigan, and that's something I am absolutely building into my education platform. It's not easy. It's an enormous undertaking, but it's absolutely critical that we get kids on the right path early on. And I recognize the challenges that families, especially in areas, in every area though. I mean, downtown Detroit, there's a dearth of options for families who need them, just like it is in the case in rural parts of the state. So this is something that's important to me too, and I appreciate you raising it. Yeah. Yes. And then I'm leaving.
Yeah. My question or comment. I just hope that you're not afraid or willing to take on economic issues and the financial side of things. The lady said that the cost-benefit analysis was getting the health care proposal faster. And I think the only way that we fail as Democrats is actually speaking in financial terms and really challenge Republicans. Their policies aren't really in keeping with what they're planning. So I hope, for instance, with the health care, because health care eats up so much of our GDP and our economic budget when it comes to the state, you're willing to say something to the effect that it's imperative that the government gets involved to regulate and bring down costs.
Yeah.
I think it's a winning argument.
I recognize that that's an important way to talk about the issues as well, because we have a tendency to forget how important it is to overcome their financial arguments, because they've been saying them for so long. They always seem to have the high ground on it, and they don't. We have to challenge them at every step on that. Okay. So, Benzie County, you're the 40th county that I've been to. I'm
Where you been?
I really appreciate your help. I appreciate you showing up today. If you do want to help, right now we are in the field collecting signatures. I need 15,000 to qualify, which means we are going to turn in 30,000, which means we want to collect about 40,000 so that we can ensure that they're valid, because I know Bill Schuette is going to be looking at every single one of them. If you are interested in helping with a fundraiser, or you want to join our social network on social media and broadcast to your friends and pull more people into into this, I would be grateful. If you want to put together a meet and greet, or if you're a member of the MEA and you want to push your union to get the endorsement process going. I mean, there's lots of different ways to be a part of this campaign. This isn't about me, this is about us, and I'm excited about working with you on this, and I really appreciate your time this morning, and I hope you all have the rest of your day is great. I'm on my way, I think, to CMU next, to talk to the CMU.